Hello guys, welcome back. My name's Nathan and today I'm going to be ranking the best players right now in the NHL. From 25 all the way down to number 1. Now we're at that point in the NHL offseason where everybody decides to rank their best NHL players, and I thought I'd take that idea for a spin. I rank my top 25 players right now in the National Hockey League. So which players do I see as the best right now in the NHL, and which players make my top 25 rankings? Watch till the end to find out. Now this happens with every single ranking video, but I wanted to emphasize this for today's one because this one, just like every other player ranking, will be controversial. If you don't like my opinion, make sure you let it be known in the comments what you agree and disagree. Let me know your list as well, but just know that's my opinion. Just because I have your favorite player below a certain player doesn't mean I hate you or that player. Just chillax for a little bit. Now let's waste no more time getting into my top 25. Now getting into the rankings, we're going to start out with Brad Marchand at the 25th position. Now a lot of people will have Brad Marchand a lot higher. I can see why, but to me I see Patrice Bergeron and David Pastrnak being the better players on the Boston Bruins, at least right now. You'll see them throughout the rankings as we go along, but I still think Brad Marchand is one of the top tier players in the league and one of the best wingers when it comes to pure offense throughout the past couple of years. Now getting into number 24, and this will be a player that also might get a little bit underrated by myself. I have Mitch Marner of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Some people might have him higher up. I personally don't. I think he's the third best forward on the Toronto Maple Leafs, behind Tavares and Auston Matthews. And when it comes to Mitch Marner, that isn't a bad thing against him. He's still a fantastic player, one of the most talented players in the league. But I don't think he's his top 10 player or anything. I think he's getting closer as the years go by, but to me, he's got to prove himself more and more. Yes, that one 90-point season with Tavares is nice, but he'll have to prove himself otherwise to really get a lot higher. Speaking of proving himself, going to number 23, I have Sebastian of the Carolina Hurricanes. Now, Aho, kind of like Marner, is a guy that in the past couple of years has really risen to that elite level, but hasn't proven himself as a top-tier player, at least consistently. When it comes to Sebastian Aho, he had a monstrous year last year. Even outside the points, he was just a dynamic player on the ice, being Carolina's most important offensive getter. I think overall, when it comes to Aho, if he continues what he had last season, he'll be one of the best Canes ever and one of the best players in the NHL. But right now, he's got to prove himself just a little bit more before he gets into that top 20 or top 10 threshold. Now going into my number 22 spot, I have another Boston Bruin, that being Patrice Bergeron. Now Patrice Bergeron, unfortunately, this past season had his season a little bit cut short due to injury, but in the playoffs he was a beast, and during the regular season he was amazing offensively. One of the better years he's had overall. I think the defense has taken a little bit of a step back, but when it comes to offense, he's better than ever. And in his mid-30s, that's pretty impressive. Now getting into one of my favorite players in the NHL, and for my 21st best NHL player, I have Brayden of the Tampa Bay Lightning. Recently just re-signed with Tampa to a glorious deal. As a Tampa Bay Lightning fan, it is absolutely magnificent. And Brayden, one of the best up-and-coming guys in the league, and I think already a top 10 center. I think when it comes to Tampa, Brayden is the guy there when it comes to centers. I think Brayden had the year that people thought Steven Stamkos did. An offensive generator, a points-making beast, and a guy that was just dynamite alongside guys like Tyler Johnson, Nikita Kucherov, you name it. He was absolutely fantastic. Yes, it is a little bit early to put him this high, but honestly, I was kind of stopping myself not putting him higher because he really is that good. Now getting into another Tampa Bay Lightning, this one going on the defensive side. For my 20th best NHL player, I have Victor Hedman. Now Victor Hedman, I absolutely love. Again, as a Lightning fan, he has been the brick on that defense for so long. Now Victor Hedman, I think, is a tad overrated, but still one of the best players in the NHL, one of the best defensemen in the NHL. I think he had a little bit of an overrated year too, wasn't as good as some people did expect. I think Ryan McDonough had an amazing year that kind of went underrated. But even with all that, Victor Hedman is one of the best two-way defensemen in the league, if not the best two-way defenseman right now in the NHL. Speaking of amazing two-way defensemen, the guy that just barely edged out Victor Hedman, I have Stanley Cup champion Alex Pietrangelo. Now this again has heavy recency bias because of the playoffs, but let's not forget how important Alex Pietrangelo was to the St. Louis Blues and their comeback and their rise to the Stanley Cup. As a Dallas Stars fan, being my number one team, I've seen a ton of Alex Pietrangelo and a ton of Alex Pietrangelo just destroying the Dallas Stars. He's an absolute stud defenseman, amazing two-way guy that'll beat you with both great offense and great defense, and a two-way guy that St. Louis has depended on for basically the past decade. Now getting into my 18th best NHL player, now going to the Florida Panthers and Alexander Barkov. Now when it comes to Barkov, to be honest, he kind of had a weird year last year. I think his offense went underrated while his defense went overrated. I think his offense was the best of his career by far. He was an absolute impact stud for the Florida Panthers, while his defense kind of took a little bit of a step back. It was kind of more average than a lot of people expected, and he wasn't really in the Selke race if you actually looked at the expected goal stats. I think Barkov that year is an anomaly rather than the norm. I think he's still an amazing two-way guy, but that kind of bumped down his overall game, even if he's still one of the best overall players in the NHL. Now going to his new Florida Panthers teammate, my number 17 spot goes to Sergei Bobrovsky. Now as I said before, I think Sergei Bobrovsky is just barely the best Florida Panthers player, but that's just because Barkov had that down year defensively. Once Barkov gets back to Selke Trophy contention, he likely will be the best overall player for Florida, but right now I will give the edge to Sergei. Just barely. Honestly, you could go between either two of them, so I just kind of put them together. But Sergei Bobrovsky is still one of the best goalies in the league. While I don't think he's number one, when he's on his game, he's one of the best in the league. Again, getting paid like it in Florida, he likely will show up. Hopefully he doesn't get too affected by that bad Florida defense, and hopefully we actually see Florida make the playoffs, which would be actually kind of cool to see. Now getting into my 16th spot, I have another Stanley Cup champion, that being Ryan O'Reilly. To me, Ryan O'Reilly, while Alex Pietrangelo was closer, I think Ryan O'Reilly is the best St. Louis Blue. From the regular season until the playoffs end, he was an absolute beast in both sides of the ice. He won the Selke Trophy, deservingly so, had the best defensive year for any forwards if you looked at the advanced stats, and got that trophy amazingly. In the playoffs was an absolute beast, won the Conn Smythe Trophy for good reason, just being an absolutely amazing two-way center, being one of the best in the NHL. And I think Ryan O'Reilly kind of had the year that Alexander Barkov was thought to have, a year that was great offense and fantastic defense, but Ryan O'Reilly is definitely making the St. Louis Blues look great, and the Buffalo Sabres look terrible for trading him a year ago. And we're getting into the top 15, and starting us out in the top 15, I have the last Boston Bruin, that being David Pastrnak. David Pastrnak, to me, is the best Boston Bruin and the most dominant Boston Bruin when he's on his game. Now, just like Bergeron, he kind of suffered from health issues both in the regular season and the playoffs, which pushed him back a little bit, but Pastrnak is one of my favorite players in the league, and to me, the most dominant player on Boston. When he's on his game offensively, there's not many better players. The absolute talent he has is extreme on every sense of the word, and he just gets it done game after game. He would have been on pace for like 95 points if he was healthy, which is a freaking shame because he was about to have a career year. Hopefully this next season for Boston, he's once again a top tier player, and I think he'll prove himself once again. Now getting into my next defenseman in the top 25, now going to the Norris Trophy winner in Mark Giordano. Mark Giordano takes the 14th spot, and deservedly so. One of the bigger risers alongside guys like Ryan O'Reilly, just had an amazing year. And Mark Giordano has been a great, solid defenseman for basically his entire career, but this last season at age 35, for some reason, he just decided to be the Norris Trophy guy, and I think he totally deserved that trophy, was the best defenseman last year, and it definitely showed. Offensively, there was no reason why he was that good. It was almost nasty, and defensively, he was as good as ever. One of the better two-way guys right now, even though he is getting older. Now getting into my 13th best NHL player, I got the new New York Ranger, Artemi Panarin. Now, Artemi Panarin is one of the most fascinating players in the league when it comes to public perception. Of course, he got that huge contract, being the second highest paid player in the league. Obviously, I think he's an overpaid player, but if you're going to overpay a player, it might as well be a guy that's dominant on the ice every single shift, and it's just an offensive machine when it comes to creating offense. I think when it comes to Panarin, it was a great add for the New York Rangers. With guys like Zibanejad and Buchnevich on their line, he's already done damage in the preseason, and I can't wait to see what he does in the regular season because he's just going to be an absolute monster out there. One of the best offensive guys in the league and has proved that in the past couple of years. With Chicago, with Columbus, and hopefully now with New York. Now we're getting into the top 12, and this is where I start to get a little bit controversial. Oh boy, I just love that, don't I? Getting into my 12th spot, this one will be one that a lot of people might see as too low, but I have Patrick Kane of the Chicago Blackhawks. Now, I still think Patrick Kane is one of the best players in the league, one of the best forwards in the league, one of the best wingers in the league. But to me right now, he is still not a top 10 player. When it comes to Patrick Kane, yes, I think he's a great player, one of the best in the league, but not quite top 10. I just prefer some other offensive guys, and I just, quite frankly, prefer some other players right now. It is close after that fantastic year. Yes, the points do matter, but I don't think he was as dominant as it showed when it comes to the points. He was great, had a great season, but I don't think is quite top 10. He used to be, obviously, but right now I think he's just short. Now, getting into my number 11 spot, I have one of the best players in the league. Obviously, he has to be pretty good. I have my Vegas Golden Knights stud, Mark Stone. Now, some people might say, why do you have Mark Stone over Patrick Kane? He got a lot more points than Mark Stone. And I think that's a valid argument. That's not a bad argument. But when we're talking about overall players in the league, when we're talking about overall wingers in the league, there is no better two-way winger than Mark Stone right now. Mark Stone basically brings every single asset to the game of hockey that you would want. An offensive machine. An offensive goal-scoring monster, man. He just gets it done every single game. He is one of the best, if not the best forward at purely creating offense for his team. He's just dominant in his own end too, with great defensive ability. He had amazing defensive stats with the freaking Ottawa Senators, which is basically unheard of. As a winger, he was contending for the Selke Trophy as a winger. That never happens, but Mark Stone was able to prove himself this past year and just be a dominant player. And also the offense ain't bad. Some people might say the points argument, but to me, everything else that Mark Stone does proves himself as a top 15 player, proves himself as an almost top 10 player. And next year, when he scores 90 or 95 points, he likely will be in my top 10. Starting us out at number 10, I have newly acquired Maple Leaf, well, technically newly acquired if you count a year, John Tavares. Now, John Tavares put up a very quiet elite season. He wasn't talked about too much while he was putting up point after point after point, and he was just quietly amazing. Playing with Mitch Marner and the already amazing offensive team in Toronto does help quite a bit, but throughout the season that saw Matthews out on injury, William Nylander holding out until December, John Tavares was a much-needed glue, and as a free agent, that doesn't exactly happen too much. But with Toronto, he just proved himself as an already elite player. He has been elite for a very long time. One of the best players in the league, and again, getting that top 10 spot, and deservedly so. Now, getting into my 9th best NHL player, I've had a guy that is just getting criminally underrated for a lot of people's lists. I've seen him go till upwards of like 40th overall, and I honestly can't understand it. That being Taylor Hall of the New Jersey Devils. Now, yes, his injury sucked, and he missed a lot of the year, but when he was healthy last season, when he had like a broken whatever, he was still absolutely dominant, and for the New Jersey Devils, they were a completely different team. And let's not forget that Taylor Hall won the MVP just a year ago. He's a pretty solid player. In my opinion, still a top 10 player, one of the best wingers in the league, and gets the spot. For New Jersey, he'll be a force to be reckoned with next season, and hopefully he stays healthy. Now, getting into the second and final goaltender in my top 25. At number 8, I have John Gibson of the Anaheim Ducks. Now, John Gibson, I think, is the best goaltender in the world. Yes, there's guys like Price or Bobrovsky, who I think are in a tier below, but John Gibson is kind of, to me, on an island of his own. If you look at one of the most important and underlooked goalie stats, that being goal save above average, which again, points to all of these expected goals metrics, it's a complicated stat, but a good one at its bare bones. He had the best goals saved above average in the NHL for the past few years, and it's not exactly close either. He's been absolutely amazing missing for a very long time, and it's been that way for Anaheim. That Anaheim defense has no business being as bad as it was last season, but it was horrendous. And John Gibson had to face 50-plus shots basically every other game, and still put up fantastic save percentage numbers. I think when it comes to John Gibson, if he gets a good defense, he'll prove himself as one of the best goaltenders, if not the best goalie in the league, but to me, he's already proved that. Now, getting into my 7th best NHL player, this one will also feature a lot of hot takes, but in my opinion, the best defenseman in the world is Erik Karlsson, coming up at number 7. Now, some people might say, oh, he was injured and he was bad at defense, but both of those are kind of wrong. Now, Erik Karlsson coming into a new team in the NHL, which he hadn't had the experience in basically over a decade, coming into a new team with an already offensive stud in Brent Burns, basically having a broken foot already, and just being banged up mentally and physically by the Ottawa Senators. He did about as well as anybody could have in that situation, and more for San Jose. Almost was a point per game even when he was healthy, and was just an offensive beast once again. Now the defense, a lot of people would say that he's terrible defensively. Now if you watched a couple of clips, then yes, he does look bad defensively because he only watched a couple of clips. But if you actually watch Erik Karlsson, he wasn't that bad defensively. He was pretty much average, wasn't great, wasn't bad either. And when you have that generational offensive talent, I'd take that any day. Now we're going to have back-to-back hot takes here for number 7 and number 6 because I basically have no chill whatsoever. Now this isn't exactly the greatest time to be super high on Auston Matthews, but besides all the drama which I have yet to cover on the channel because I want to wait for more info, I think Auston Matthews is the 6th best player in the NHL. Now again, this really does depend on how you evaluate players, because if you evaluate them on a lot of defense, if you factor that in, especially when it comes to forwards, Auston Matthews is not going to be a top 10 guy for you. His defense is definitely not one that you'd like on your team, but the offense more than makes up for it alongside guys like Erik Karlsson too in that same situation. When it comes to 5v5 goal scoring, he's been one of the best in the past few years, which considering how many games he's missed is absolutely incredible. And people like to point to Mitch Marner and his points to say why he's better, but if Auston Matthews was healthy and played with a guy like John Tavares, I'm sure he'd have no problem whatsoever getting to 90 points. The best teammate he's really had has been Kasperi Kapanen, and while he is pretty good, I don't think he's any John Tavares, which I think we can all agree with. Hopefully. But now getting into the top 5, the cream of the crop, now getting into the best players in my opinion in the NHL. Starting us out at number 5, I have Alex Ovechkin. Now once again, it depends on where you evaluate players, because again, if you want defense in your forward, Alex Ovechkin doesn't exactly fit that bill. But when it comes to goal scoring, just like Auston Matthews, there's been no better player, I think, in NHL history. I'll say this time and time again, I think, honestly, Alex Ovechkin is the best goal scorer in NHL history and deserves to be praised like one. For how difficult it is to score goals in today's NHL, honestly, Alex Ovechkin has continued to make it look like easy work, time and time again. And even in his mid-30s, still being an old man, now having his son, he's still a freaking beast and will continue to be one for the Washington Capitals. Now getting into my number 4 best NHL player, getting into the last Tampa Bay lining on this list, now being to Nikita Kucherov. When it comes to wingers right now in the NHL, Nikita Kucherov is basically the cream of the crop. He is the cherry on the cake of so many great wingers right now available. But Nikita Kucherov is the guy, having over 120 points, just having a dominant year on the ice. Yes, having guys like Brayden Point, Steven Stamkos, and all the other guys on Tampa Bay definitely does help. But Nikita Kucherov is a dominant player in his own right with fantastic skills, and he's proved that over the past half decade, ever since he was drafted. And we're getting into the top 3 in my top 25 list between the last 3 centers, in my opinion, MacKinnon, Crosby, and Connor McDavid. I don't think this will come as any surprise, but at number 3, I have Nathan MacKinnon. When it comes to dominant players that just dominate when they're on the ice, there's not many better players than Nathan MacKinnon right now. Honestly, just watching him as a Stars fan, I got to see a lot of him over the past few years. He's just been an absolutely chaotic player for any defense in the league. With great speed, great agility, and fantastic franchise-leading skill, Nathan MacKinnon just makes it into a perfect showcase of how to play hockey. He's just an offensive mind with great offensive IQ every single game. He's a guy that for Colorado is insanely valuable. One of the more valuable players right now in the NHL. Going into the age-old Sidney Crosby versus Connor McDavid debate, and this is one that I kind of settled for myself the past couple of years. I think, honestly, when it comes to that debate, it's a close one, but it does depend on how you evaluate players. Again, like we said before, if you evaluate a lot of players forward-wise on defense a lot more, then you're probably going to have Sidney Crosby as your number one guy. But to me, I prioritize franchise-changing offensive talent, and that's what Connor McDavid brings. To me, Sidney Crosby is the second best player in the league, and Connor McDavid is the best player in the league. When it comes to offensive talent and potential, Connor McDavid right now is the best since prime Sidney Crosby, which, by the way, if you don't know, was pretty freaking good. Yes, Connor McDavid didn't put up as many stats, or as good stats as Nikita Kucherov did. He's still a elite, franchise-changing offensive talent, and again, with the poor Edmonton Oilers, hasn't been able to make the playoffs in quite a while. But either way, I think McDavid is the best player, maybe not all-around player, but the best player right now in the NHL. Not degrading Sidney Crosby whatsoever, but Connor McDavid is my number one. But of course, with this video, that totally won't piss anybody off. I had to hear your guys' thoughts down in those comments down below. So let me know what you think about my top 25, what you agree and disagree with, and of course the big, huge question on to you, who do you think are the best players in the NHL, and how would you rank them in order? But if you guys want some more Grav videos just like this one, you should click on this card right here to watch my video on my best NHL player for every NHL team. Trust me, it's definitely binge-worthy. But that'll be it for today, guys. If you guys enjoy, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit that notification bell if you haven't already. Again, comment down below your thoughts on my rankings and what you agree and disagree with. Share this video with your friends also if you haven't. Any hockey fans you know. Trying to grow the Grav gang as much as possible on the road to 10K subscribers too. Absolutely insane. My name's Nathan, and I'll see you guys in the next video or stream. Goodbye.